You have been taught to pray as a beggar, to plead with a distant God for the scraps of your own existence, and in this you have been missiled. The prayer I speak of is not a petition sent out into the void, but a profound and radical act of listening, an inner stillness where the one who prays and the one who is prayed to are revealed as not two, but one. This is not about changing your world, but allowing your world to be transformed by a consciousness that is already your own. What you are about to hear will dismantle everything you thought you knew about prayer and reveal the one utterance that, when realized, does not ask for a new reality, but unveils the eternal reality that has always been. Stay with this, for what follows is the gateway. For your entire life, the mechanism of prayer has been presented to you as a sacred form of asking. You are told to kneel, to clasp your hands, to formulate a request from your limited human understanding of what is needed. You ask for health, for supply, for a change in a relationship, for a solution to a problem. You present your list of desires and your list of troubles to a power you perceive as separate from yourself, a deity in the sky, and you hope, with a mixture of faith and desperation, that this external entity will be pleased with your words, your attitude, or your worthiness, and will grant your request. This entire framework, from the posture of the beggar to the concept of a separate God, is the fundamental error that has kept you in a state of perpetual spiritual poverty. It is a cosmic misunderstanding of the highest order, and it is the very barrier that prevents you from experiencing the reality of answered prayer. Consider the implications of this common approach. When you pray for a specific outcome, a new job, the healing of an illness, the resolution of a conflict, what is the underlying consciousness? It is a consciousness of lack. It is an acknowledgement that in this moment, your reality is defined by an absence. You do not have the job. You do not have the health. You do not have the peace. Your prayer, then, is a fervent wish for your external circumstances to rearrange themselves to alleviate this feeling of lack. But this only empowers the illusion of the circumstance. You are, in effect, building a shrine to the problem itself, affirming its reality and your separation from the solution. You are standing outside the house of your own being, peering through the windows at a life you wish you had, and calling out to a passing stranger to come and furnish it for you, never realizing you have always held the key. This error is not merely theological, it is practical and psychological. It creates a schism within your own mind. On one hand, you are the humble, finite human beset with problems. On the other, you have conceptualized an infinite, all-powerful God. The gap between these two concepts seems unbridgeable, and so your prayer becomes an act of spiritual negotiation across a vast chasm. The tension this creates is immense. You wonder if you have asked correctly, if you have enough faith, if you are deserving. You look for signs that your petition has been received and approved. Your entire spiritual life becomes a transaction, and like any transaction, it is fraught with the anxiety of potential rejection. The peace that is promised as the fruit of prayer remains elusive because your very approach is rooted in the anxiety of wanting. Let us examine a daily life example. You are facing a significant financial difficulty. A bill is due and the funds are not present. The traditional prayer arises from a place of deep fear and need. Please, God, send me the money for this bill. This prayer, though seemingly pious, is an affirmation of your poverty. It solidifies your identity as one who lacks. It places the power to solve your problem entirely outside of yourself and sets up a timeline for a miracle, after which, if the money does not appear, you are left with a reinforced belief in either God's indifference or your own unworthiness. The entire cycle is one of powerlessness. Now, what if the error is not in God's response, but in your very definition of what prayer is? The truth that has been missed is that the prayer which transforms reality does not begin with your human voice asking for something. It begins with a profound and radical silence that allows you to hear something. The transformation occurs not when God intervenes to change your world, but when a shift in your consciousness reveals that the world you were praying about was never the ultimate reality to begin with. The fundamental error is the belief that prayer is your activity directed toward God, when in reality, the only prayer that has ever been answered is the activity of God, of pure divine consciousness, appearing as your own awareness. When you ask for health, you are starting from the consciousness of sickness. But what if you could relinquish both the plea for health and the fear of sickness to abide in a consciousness that knows neither, because it is the very substance of wholeness itself? This is not a semantic game. It is the difference between living in a world of effects, which you are always trying to fix, and abiding as the cause, which needs no fixing. The beggar's posture keeps you focused on the contents of your life, the broken objects, the empty spaces. It trains you to be an expert in inventorying your lacks. The spiritual journey, therefore, cannot truly begin until this primary misapprehension is seen through completely. You must be willing to lay down the entire burden of asking, to release the desperate hope that a better set of circumstances is the equivalent of salvation. This feels like a risk, for it asks you to give up the only method you have ever known. But it is only in this surrender of the old, futile mechanism that the space is cleared for an entirely different kind of prayer to reveal itself. A prayer that is not something you do, but a presence that you consciously, willingly, and attentively become. This is the great transition, the pivot from the outer court of the temple, where the beggars plead, to the inner sanctuary, where nothing is asked, because everything is already gloriously and ineffably known. Having set aside the futile activity of begging from a distant God, we now enter the profound and fertile space of silence. This is not a passive emptiness, not a mere absence of sound, but a state of intense, focused, and receptive listening. It is the very core of true prayer. You are no longer broadcasting your list of desires into the universe. You are tuning your entire being to receive a signal that has always been transmitting. Think of your mind as a radio for your entire life. You have been trying to speak into the speaker, demanding that the station play your song, all the while creating static and distortion with your own noise. Receptive listening is the act of ceasing your own transmission, of carefully, intentionally, turning the dial until you lock onto a clear, powerful, and pre-existing frequency of infinite wisdom and grace. This shift from speaking to listening is the most practical spiritual step you will ever take. It moves you from a state of doing to a state of being. In your daily life, this looks like sitting in the midst of a crisis and, instead of frantically scrambling for solutions from your limited mental library, you consciously become still. You do not ask, "What should I do?" You inwardly become quiet and listen for a presence of knowing. You are not waiting for a voice to speak words in your ear. You are waiting for a conscious adjustment to take place within your own awareness. It is the difference between staring at a tangled knot, trying to force it apart with your fingers, and holding it gently, feeling for the single thread that, when pulled, allows the entire knot to loosen effortlessly. The intellect strains and struggles. Receptive listening feels for the release. Consider a situation where you are in a difficult conversation. The old pattern of the beggar, mind is already formulating its defense, its counter-argument, its plea to be understood. This creates tension, conflict, and a battle of two separate wills. Now, imagine in that moment, you remember this principle. Instead of preparing your next speech, you drop inwardly into a state of listening. You are not just listening to the other person's words, you are listening through the words, through the emotion, for a deeper harmony. You are listening from the consciousness that is the source of both of you. In that quiet, receptive space, something remarkable happens. The need to defend your fragile self-image dissolves. A response may arise, but it will not be from your personal, reactive mind. It will be spontaneous, appropriate, and often surprisingly wise, dissolving the conflict not by winning it, but by transcending its very basis. This is how the divine activity operates. It is not a thought you have, it is a knowing that it has you. It is an impulse that moves through you. When you are faced with a creative block, the beggar prays for inspiration, growing more desperate and tense with each passing minute of silence. The one who practices receptive listening, however, sits down before the blank canvas or the empty page and becomes quiet. They do not demand an idea. They become a vessel, an open doorway. They attend to the silence itself with a gentle expectation. And from that silence, an idea will begin to form, not as a frantic invention of the mind, but as a gentle emergence from a deeper source. It will feel less like you created it, and more like you discovered it, or that it was given to you. This is the flow of inspiration, which is simply the activity of a larger consciousness expressing itself through your unique form and talents. The practice is one of attentive surrender. You are not withdrawing from life, You are engaging with life from a different center of gravity. While washing the dishes, you can be lost in a mental narrative about the troubles of your day, begging for them to be over. Or you can bring your attention fully to the feeling of the warm water, the sight of the soap bubbles, the sound of the clinking plates. In that simple, focused attention, you are not a beggar. You are a listener hearing the sacrament of the present moment. The problem that seemed so large may not be solved in that instant, but your relationship to it will have been transformed because you have, for a moment, stepped out of the problem, based consciousness, and into the solution, based consciousness of pure, unadorned awareness. This receptive listening is the great corrective. It is the antidote to the feverish activity of the sense, mind that believes it must figure everything out, control everything, and secure its own safety. It is in this deep inner quietude that a fundamental reorientation occurs. You are no longer a subject looking at a world of objects, trying to get what you need from it. You begin to feel yourself as the very awareness in which both the subject and the object appear. And in that realization, a new and startling intimacy is born. The separation between you and the source of all good begins to dissolve, not as a theological concept, but as a felt, living experience. The listener and the voice being listened for are discovered to be drawing nearer to one another until the distinction itself starts to fade, revealing a union that is, and ever will be the foundation of your being. This brings us to the very heart of the mystery, the ultimate revelation that lies waiting in the depth of that receptive silence. For as you listen, not for a word, but for a presence, a startling discovery begins to dawn. The you that is listening and the eight that you are listening for are not, and never have been, two separate entities. The seeker and the sought are one. This is not a philosophical idea to be believed, but a living reality to be realized. It is the end of the search, because you discover that what you have been seeking with such desperation is, in fact, the very substance of your own awareness, the very I that is doing the seeking. The moment you turn within, truly within, to find God, you are turning with the very faculty that God is. This is the great pivot from a spirituality of relationship to a spirituality of identity. You are not a human being trying to have a relationship with a divine being. You are the divine being, consciously or unconsciously, expressing as this human form. The separation was the grand illusion, the primal dream from which we are all awakening. Think of a wave upon the ocean. The wave may believe itself to be a separate entity with its own unique form, its own beginning and end. It might even pray to the vast ocean, "Please do not let me crash upon the shore. Please let me remain a wave forever." But the wave is not separate from the ocean. It is the ocean, expressing itself momentarily as a wave. Its very existence is the ocean's existence. Its substance is the ocean's substance. When it realizes this, its fear vanishes. It understands that even when its form as a wave subsides, it does not cease to be, it merely returns to its true, limitless nature is the ocean itself. Your sense of a separate self is the wave. Your true identity is the ocean of infinite consciousness. Let this illuminate your daily experience. You sit to meditate, to pray, to listen. The mind is busy, filled with thoughts, worries, and memories. The churning activity of the personal sense of self. You notice a desire to be free from this noise, to find a peace that feels distant from you. This very desire implies a separation. You hear, peace over there. But what is the nature of that which is aware of the noisy mind? Is it itself noisy? Is it troubled? Is it limited? Look closely. The awareness that witnesses the thought is prior to the thought, untouched by its content. This awareness is not a personal possession. It is the very field in which the personal sense of you arises and plays its part. This aware presence is what you are. It is the I am before it gets qualified as I am sick, I am poor, I am afraid. This pure, unqualified I am is the living Christ. The Buddha nature, the Atman, it is the sought, and you are it. When you are confronted with a challenge, perhaps a sudden illness, the old pattern of the separate self screams in panic. It feels alone, a fragile entity under attack. It prays to a God outside for rescue. But the realized consciousness approaches this same challenge from an entirely different standpoint. It does not deny the physical symptoms, but it knows that its fundamental identity is not in the body. It is the very life force that animates the body. Just as the wave knows it is ocean, this consciousness knows, I am the very principle of life itself, appearing as this form. This is not a denial of the condition, but a shifting of authority from the condition to the source. From this standpoint, your inner work is not one of begging for life to enter a dead form, but of consciously abiding as that life and allowing that knowing to harmonize the form from within. The healing power is not something applied from outside. It is the natural, unobstructed flow of your own true being. This realization dissolves the core of all loneliness. The feeling of being a separate, isolated consciousness is the root of all human suffering. But when you discover that the consciousness within you is the same consciousness that forms the tree outside your window, that gives intelligence to the bird in flight. That is the love you feel for your family. The universe ceases to be a collection of objects out there and is revealed as the infinite expression of the one in here. Your interactions with others are transformed. You are no longer meeting them as one separate person to another. You are the one, recognizing itself in another form. Criticism, judgment, and fear begin to melt away, not through effort, but through this natural, effortless recognition. You begin to live from the truth of oneness, and your entire life becomes a spontaneous, responsive activity of that one infinite consciousness, fulfilling its own perfect purpose in, through, and as you. This realization of oneness ushers in the most liberating truth of all your life is not, and never has been, a solo performance. It is the continuous, effortless, and impersonal activity of divine consciousness itself. To believe that you are the personal author of your own good, the one who must strive and struggle to achieve spiritual heights or material security, is to remain trapped in the final, most subtle layer of the illusion of separation. That you have always taken yourself to be the I, that gets anxious, that plans, that fails, that succeeds, is not the prime mover. It is a temporary formation within a vast, intelligent, and infinitely creative field of consciousness. The wave does not command the ocean. The ocean expresses itself as the wave. Your true work is to step aside, not in apathy, but in profound trust, and let this impersonal activity have its way with you, through you, and as you. This is where prayer completes its transformation from a human act to a divine event. It is no longer you, a separate entity, trying to connect with God. It is God as your own awareness, connecting itself to itself in every appearance of your life. Think of a fountain. The water at the apex of the spray may glisten in the sun, a distinct and beautiful droplet. It may feel itself to be separate, a unique creation, but it did not place itself there. The entire force of the water rising from the source is what propels it, sustains it, and gives it its form and trajectory. Its very existence is an activity of the source. Your life is exactly like this. Every thought that has ever led to a breakthrough, every moment of compassion that has ever flowed through you, every creative impulse that has ever felt like a sudden download, these were not your personal creations. They were the fountain of divine consciousness expressing its own infinite nature at the point of your individual experience. Let this truth permeate a practical challenge. You have a critical project at work, and you feel the heavy weight of responsibility. The personal sense of I tightens its grip. I must be brilliant. I must not fail. I must figure this out. This pressure is the surest sign that you have forgotten the impersonal activity. You are the droplet trying to will itself higher, straining against the air. The fatigue and anxiety are inevitable. Now, shift your stance. Remember the fountain. Sit with your project not from a place of personal ownership, but from the quiet confidence of being a conduit. Become still and receptive, not to get an idea for yourself, but to allow the intelligence that formed the universe to express its own brilliance through the unique filter of your skills and experience. You will find that ideas begin to come. Solutions present themselves. The right people cross your path. The work begins to flow. This is not a passive hope. It is an active reliance on a law. You are not doing less. You are allowing a greater power to do more, and your personal activity becomes aligned, graceful, and effective beyond your own capacity. This understanding utterly transforms your relationship with error and with success. When a mistake occurs, the personal I rushes in to claim it, wrapped in shame and self-recrimination. But from the standpoint of the impersonal activity, every experience is part of the curriculum of consciousness. The mistake was a necessary point of adjustment in the infinite unfolding, not a personal failure. It is data for the divine adjustment, not a verdict on your worth. Similarly, when a great success arrives, The personal, I, swells with pride, claiming the victory. But the realized individual feels a profound humility, knowing the victory was not theirs, but the natural and inevitable fruit of aligning with a perfect law. They feel gratitude, not pride, for they know they were but the instrument through which a heavenly symphony was played. This is the end of the burden of self. It is the release from the exhausting task of being the general manager of the universe, a job for which the personal ego is tragically unqualified. Your entire role simplifies into one of attentive cooperation. You tend to the garden of your mind, pulling the weeds of fear, doubt, and personal will, not to build a kingdom for yourself, but to prepare a clear and open channel for the divine activity to manifest as harmony, as supply, as right relationship, as health. You do not need to create the good. You only need to stop the personal sense of I from obstructing the good that is forever flowing from its infinite source. Your life ceases to be a problem to be solved and becomes an unfoldment to be witnessed, a song to be sung, a dance to be danced. Not by you, but by the one great dancer whose only body is the universe and whose movement is the eternal, impersonal, and loving activity of its own self-revelation. This understanding of the impersonal activity reveals the true nature of all transformation. It is not an acquisition of something new, not a change from a bad reality to a good one, but an unveiling of the eternal reality that has always been present beneath the veil of your misperception. The world does not need to be transformed. Your perception of the world needs to be corrected. You are not a flawed creature in a broken world, striving to earn a state of grace you never had. You are the very expression of grace itself, temporarily believing a story of separation and lack. The entire spiritual journey, therefore, is not one of building, but of unbuilding, not one of attainment, but of remembering, not one of journeying to a distant goal, but of waking up to the beauty of where you have always been standing. Consider the analogy of a dusty window. The sun is always shining in its full, brilliant glory outside, but from inside the room, the light appears dim, distorted, and filtered through layers of grime. The problem is not with the sun. The problem is with the condition of the window. The traditional approach to prayer is like sitting in the dim room and begging the sun to shine brighter, to change its nature, to penetrate the dirt. But the sun is already shining with infinite power. The only meaningful work is to clean the window. The moment you wipe away the grime, you do not create the sunlight, you unveil it. You allow it to flood the room naturally, effortlessly, and in its full, unadulterated power. The grime on the window is the accumulation of your beliefs in separation, your judgments, your fears, and your ingrained sense of a personal, struggling self. The practice of receptive listening and abiding in the impersonal activity is the cloth that wipes the pain clean. Apply this to a tangible human experience, the search for abundance. The room is dim. You see only lack and limitation. The bills are the dust on the pane. The anxious thoughts are the grime. The old prayer was a plea for more money to appear, a desperate attempt to change the circumstances in the dim room. But the spiritual truth is that the light of infinite supply is already shining. Its nature is to give, to express, to overflow. Your work is not to chase the supply, but to clean the window of your consciousness regarding supply. This means consciously abiding in the truth that your true identity is one with the source of all, that the impersonal activity is the substance of your supply, and that your purpose is to be a transparency for its expression. As you do this, the grime of fear and scarcity begins to dissolve. You may find yourself moving with more confidence, noticing opportunities you were previously blind to, or experiencing unexpected provisions. The supply did not come from outside. It was unveiled as the ever-present reality of your situation, which your fear had previously obscured. This principle is the key to healing. The body appears to be sick. The senses and the medical reports confirm the dim light in the room. But what if the body, as perceived, is part of the window itself? What if the condition is the dust and not the reality? The light of pure, unconditioned life is always shining. It is the very substance of your being. To pray for healing from the standpoint of unveiling is not to fight the disease, but to turn your attention completely away from the testimony of the senses and to abide with unwavering conviction in the truth of that eternal life. You are not a sick person trying to become well. You are the perfect life, temporarily appearing as a sick form. You are not adding health to a sick body. You are allowing the health that is your eternal nature to be revealed, to come to the surface, just as the clean window reveals the sun. This is not a mental denial of symptoms. It is a spiritual affirmation of a greater reality, which, when realized, reorganizes the form to conform to its own harmonious nature. The thrill of this path is that it ends the exhausting battle with your circumstances. You are no longer trying to rearrange the furniture in the dark room. You are simply cleaning the window, knowing with absolute certainty that as the light streams in, it will reveal the room to be already perfect, already whole, already furnished with the grace of God. Every challenge, every problem, every moment of lack or fear becomes an invitation not to change the world, but to cleanse your perception. The entire outer scene is but a shadow cast by the inner state of your consciousness. When you stop trying to manipulate the shadows and instead turn on the light of truth within, the shadows, no matter how frightening or solid they appeared, vanish instantly, not because they were fought, but because they never had any substance independent of the light. Your reality is not transformed, it is revealed, and in that revelation, you find a peace that the world cannot give and cannot take away, for it is the peace of your own eternal being unveiled at last. The ultimate fulfillment of this prayer is not a momentary experience of bliss, but a permanent shift in the very ground of your being. It is to live from the answered prayer, to take up residence in the state of consciousness where the separation between you and the divine has been seen through completely. You are no longer seeking a solution because you have realized yourself as the very substance of the solution. The search is over, not because you have found an object, but because you have awakened to the truth that you are the subject of all experience, the I am that is one with the Father. Your life ceases to be a series of petitions and becomes a continuous, spontaneous embodiment of the harmony you once begged for. You are not waiting for a response from God. Your very existence is the living response. This is the practical demonstration of all that has come before. It means that when you face a situation that would have once triggered a storm of fear and desperate pleading, you now find yourself abiding in a profound and unshakable stillness. The prayer is already answered, not in the outer condition, but in the inner kingdom. You are not looking to the future for your good. You are drawing it forth from the eternal present within you. Imagine you are about to enter a crucial meeting where your financial future seems to be on the line. The old consciousness would be frantically rehearsing arguments, gripped by the anxiety of potential loss. But living from the answered prayer, you walk into that room with a deep, quiet knowing that the principle of supply is your own being. You are not going in to get something. You are going in as the embodiment of that something, and your interactions become a form of sharing that abundance, of expressing that intelligence. The outcome, whatever form it takes, is then recognized as the perfect activity of the impersonal consciousness unfolding in divine order. This life is characterized by a sense of effortless action and perfect timing, because you are no longer operating from a personal sense of urgency and lack. You are guided by an intelligence that knows the right action at the right time. It is like a master sailor on a river. The novice fights the current, strains at the oars, and exhausts himself trying to force his way to his destination. The master, however, feels the current, understands the wind, and sets his sail. He uses the inherent power of the river itself to carry him, making small adjustments rather than frantic efforts. He arrives not exhausted, but refreshed, having cooperated with a power greater than his own muscular strength. Living from the answered prayer is like setting your sail to the current of divine consciousness. You move through your day with a sense of flow, meeting the right people, hearing the right words, and being directed to the right opportunities, not because you manipulated the world, but because you aligned yourself with the invisible current that is already moving everything toward its harmonious conclusion. Your relationships are transformed in this light. You no longer look to another person to complete you, to validate you, or to provide you with the love your separate self craves. You relate to them from the fullness of your own realized nature. You are the love you sought. Any interaction then becomes an opportunity to express that love rather than to extract it. If a relationship ends, there is not the same devastating sense of loss, because your source of love was never the other person. It was the infinite well within your own I am-ness. You are able to love without clinging, to give without exhausting your resources, because you are not a personal self giving away its limited possessions, but the impersonal activity of love, loving through you. This is the fruit of the one prayer a life lived not as a problem to be solved, but as a melody to be played. The focus shifts entirely from the outer phenomena to the inner cause. You stop checking the weather of your circumstances and instead abide in the unchangeable climate of your true nature. A challenge arises, and instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you turn within and affirm, "I am the peace that transcends this appearance. I am the wisdom that knows the way. I am the life that cannot be threatened." You are not stating these things to change God's mind, but to align your own mind with the eternal fact of your being. You are living from the reality that the prayer for peace, for wisdom, for life was always answered before it was even formed as a thought, because what you are is the very substance of that for which you prayed. The journey ends where it began, but with a knowing that was absent at the start. You were never separate. You were never lacking. And the entire drama of seeking and finding was simply the long, gentle process of the one remembering itself as you.